Councilmember Sperry. Councilmember Danuski.
Here.
Mayor Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Curtis.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness.
Here.
Don't touch the mic.
Councilmember Herbig.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
If you will please rise and join me in the flag salute.
We got Nigel's fixed.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next item on the agenda then is the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. And the next item then is Kenmore flag presentation, the Kenmore Historical Society. Ooh.
Mayor Baker and City Council, I'm Leroy Annenson. I represent the Kenmore Heritage Society tonight. Our president is Annette Eaton, and our vice president is Matt Martin. About 3 years ago, Les Bud Eaton and I presented to you, the council then, and you're three of you present now who were then there at that time. We presented a copy of the DVD, which is an accord of the history of the Kenmore flag, as just a token gift from the Heritage Society in appreciation for you, council people, and your public service on behalf of the Kenmore community. Now tonight, it was at that time, of course, determined that we would continue as the years went on to try to continue the presentation to new council members. And I believe now we have 4 of you who are new since that last presentation. So we're here tonight to present to you 4 our appreciation, together with the others who are present, have been present before, from the Kenmore Heritage Society. Since it's so close to Easter, the Heritage Society decided that maybe they should make up a pre-Easter basket for you. Obviously, the basket will include a copy of the DVD and a little hand flag and even some goodies that kids could enjoy. And this year, they're also adding a copy of of our famous Kenmore history book. And I might say to you 4 new members, if you have one already, then feel free to share the surplus one with someone who's interested in Kenmore. And I would also say to the 3 of you who were at the previous presentation, if you don't have one, we are at the point we want to present one to you tonight. Matt Martin has made a clip, about a 5-minute clip from our DVD to show you tonight, and after he presents that, then we will present our gifts. But if I may, for just a couple minutes before I call on Matt, I'd like to make a commendation to you, the council, to our present staff people, and also to the council and staff members of the past for your support in promoting the Kenmore flag. Now, we all know that the state of Washington has thousands of cities and towns, and our nation has tens of thousands of cities, but comparatively speaking, very few have their own flag. And Kenmore is one of those few, rare ones. We think that's unique and great. But it's happened because of a lot of correspondence and cooperation and promotion. And maybe I just say briefly again, remind you as staff and council and others that in the past you continue to amplify the importance of the flag through the use of the logo. The logo is always kind of a pictorial resume of some of the special assets of a city. You have the logo on your literature and on your promotion material, on your vehicles. You exhibit the Kenmore flag in your chamber here for council meetings. You exhibit to the public the flag. And I might say that it's impressive that when this new city hall was developed or planned and then finally built, you didn't only build one flagpole or two, but three. And again, comparatively speaking, there aren't many city halls in this state that have three flagpoles. Now we know that the architect put floodlights or spotlights at the base of these flagpoles, and that made it legal that you could fly the flag at night. But most of us are aware that those spots didn't quite reach, on a dark night, don't quite reach the top of the pole. So the flags continued to fly in the dark. And if I could just, in a bracket here, personally, I'd like to thank Rob, our city manager, and his staff, Jennifer, for facilitating so we have another spotlight now out there at about a 40-degree angle. And now when I come by the city hall at night, I see a huge, bright, brilliant, round spot in the sky. And there are three flags flying proudly. And it's the national, the state, and a brilliant gold flag called the Kenmore City flag. That's unique. It's special. Thank you.
Kick us off.
Welcome to this history presentation of the Kenmore, Washington City flag. It is our pleasure to present to you the history of the city flag that flies over Kenmore, Washington.
Is the audio plugged into the jack, the audio jack?
The crown that caps the north end of beautiful Lake Washington at a location once known as the northwest frontier.
Put the microphone down by the speaker.
This symbol flows in the wind. We ask ourselves, what do we know about our flag? Where did it come from? Why was it created? Who was the designer? And what does the logo on the flag depict? To start, let's turn back in time. It is 1889, and Washington State, the last state of the Oregon Territory, joins the Union as the 42nd state. This new state is an untamed land of desert on the east, separated from the west by a high mountain range of vast wilderness and dense forest, interspersed with many rivers and lakes as it extends to the Pacific Ocean. 12 years pass. It is 1901, and into the Pacific Northwest, a Scotsman named John McMaster enters this untamed land and begins logging at the north end of Lake Washington. He constructed a shingle mill and a settlement for the mill workers. John's name for this new logging community was Kenmore, in honor of his beloved home in Kenmore, Ontario, Canada. The community continued to grow over the next 7 decades. It is now 1979, and the unincorporated Kenmore area of King County, Washington State, has grown into a community of many small businesses with a large residential population. In an effort to promote the pride, goodwill, and a positive image of their community, the Kenmore Chamber of Commerce assembled a committee identified as the Image Building Committee. Robert Cruikshank, staff artist for the Suburbanite, a local monthly magazine, volunteered his time and designed a logo to represent the committee's vision. The flag color would be gold, with a 4-part logo in the colors of white, green, blue, and black. The logo's white-capped mountains and evergreen trees are to remind everyone of the beautiful Northwest in which the Kenmore community is situated. Since the land area for commercial development in Kenmore is somewhat limited, the long-range plan proposed some moderate high-rise buildings. This progressive attitude is reflected in the designed skyline with a shadowed row of buildings. The seaplane, sailboats, and water depict the virtual harbor in the Kenmore community, a community featuring recreational activity and services, as illustrated by the moving seaplane, but also by a peaceful community in which to live, as represented in the tranquility of the sailboats. The committee's intent was that the Kenmore flag would proudly convey the beauty, progressiveness, and tranquility of Kenmore and its future. Brett Myers, another volunteer of the flag project, developed a silkscreen of the logo and processed a work-up model of the flag. After incorporation of Kenmore as a city, one of the original designed flags was received for the city by Kenmore's first mayor, Jack Crawford. Presenting the flag was Leroy Annenson, one of the original members of the Image Building Committee. On September 23, 1998, the city adopted a slightly modified version of the original flag, thereby giving the city of Kenmore its official city flag. David Marin, co-chairman of the Kenmore Incorporation Committee, and Alga Janssens, a graphic artist who donated her time and skills, designed the modification and created the flag that is today the city's official flag. The original flag logo was retained and reworked in design to include the words Kenmore by the Lake in place of the word Kenmore. Blue herons were added because the heron is the official bird of the city of Kenmore, with numerous rookeries throughout the area. In respect of their original flag, remaining members of the original flag committee requested the city proclaim an official Flag Day in Kenmore. The City Council, to honor both the spirit of their flag and commemorate the anniversary of the city's incorporation, by proclamation on May 8, 2000, proclaimed August 31st of each year as official Kenmore Flag Day.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Your Honor, if I can, I'd just like to thank Mr. Martin and Mr. Annenson for this presentation tonight. And I've got to say, Leroy has been very persistent in getting us to improve the lighting on that flag. And we initially just tried to improve or increase the wattage coming out from the pavement, and that didn't work. And he let us know right away. And so we decided, well, let's go big. Let's really get some good lights. And so the lighting that we have now was initially installed a little bit higher up the pole on the other side. And it was so bright that the neighbors across Kenmore Village in the apartments that were living over there called us and said, "What is that bright light? It's keeping us awake." And so we lowered it and put it more at an upward angle, and it's working great now. So that's more of the story behind the lighting.
All right.
So there was some debate about which council member received the last time. We were thinking it was 4 of you, but it's only, it's 4. All right.
Oh, I have one, but thank you. Do you want me to take another one? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Wow, presents.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
Thank
redoing
you.
your video.
All right. Next item on the agenda then is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views that are important to you on issues about the community. And we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. There's a new system in effect when the green light is on. It will change to yellow and you have 30 seconds left, and when the red light comes on, you're out of time. We ask that you please try to abide by the 3-minute time limit. And clerk, please call the first person.
Matthew Jordan.
Good evening. I have a little bit of show and tell, so I'll try and stick to the 3 minutes as best I can. I'm here tonight just to kind of inform the council and the city of Kenmore something that we've been
One
doing.
more time. Could I get you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, Matthew Jordan. The address is 24114 Locust Way, just over the border into Snohomish County. Of course, we live there, but everything's done here, obviously. I took this opportunity because the timing was perfect for me to come down and kind of show you what our family and our little neighborhood has done. For the last 16, 17 years, we have a coho salmon hatchery at our house. It releases the salmon into what I think the city of Kenmore has now called Blueberry Creek. We were calling it something else, but it flows down 62nd Avenue, kind of crosses underneath of it, goes down behind the old Blueberry Farm, and eventually dumps into Swamp Creek. We've done this for 17 years just on our own. We've been involved with the school, Kenmore, or not Kenmore, but Locust Elementary School, taking the salmon down there that we raise, going through a couple of the teachers' classes, showing them the life cycle of the salmon, and the teachers are well aware of that and have a great time with it. The reason I'm here tonight is that our last take of salmon, is what we call it, has come out of the incubator. I brought some down for you tonight. They're coho. We release about 5,000 every year into Blueberry Creek, which obviously ends up in Swamp Creek. So before I waste all my time, you guys will go ahead, and these are fresh out of the creek right tonight. They are the last batch. Oh, they're the last batch going out. 5,000 have already gone out, 4,500 or so. These photos are of our creek and the actual hatchery itself. The reason I wanted to bring it down tonight was that for the last 16 years, we've pretty much done this on our own. Blueberry Creek is, quite frankly, a mess. And many years ago, we had Adopt a Stream go through there. They found 16 different culverts that need to be replaced to allow salmon to move back up the creek to where I live. My neighbors get them, but I raise them and I don't see anything. So what I'm here today is to ask if there's some way the city of Kenmore and I and volunteers, and I know you've had this pitch before from other folks, can help out a little bit logistics-wise, either helping us find a homeowner so we can talk to them and inform them and educate them as to what we want to do. We'd like to get down some of these barriers we have so that we can keep this thing going back and forth. I'm sure you guys are all aware of what Issaquah does with Salmon Days. You have this incredible opportunity here with Swamp Creek Park to basically mimic that. If you can restore and get a decent run moving, you could actually have that type of thing that they have. Make it part of your city, make it part of your festivals, whatever. You have to time it right, obviously. I think it'd be a really neat thing. I mean, I was involved with Bothell, daylighting that creek down there. I was so glad that after they threw it out, they put it back in. And I think they're going to really benefit from it years down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you very much.
All right, where'd they go?
Elizabeth Mooney.
I want to take a picture of these little guys. Here we go. Okay, that's hope. All right, Elizabeth Mooney, 5934 Northeast 201st Street. I am really happy to see Matt Jordan here. The kids at Lockwood, where I had also helped get a Salmon in the Classroom grant from King County. We collaborated with Matt and his family and went to his house, went down to Log Boom. The city condoned our grant, and the kids had the Salmon in the Classroom. So hopefully we can collaborate in the future. We have to make sure that the shoreline is safe for both the kids. And anyway, I think that is a step in the right direction. So I'm really happy that we brought in the peacekeepers, which are basically the kids and the salmon in our future. I'm hoping that that will permeate through everything that I'm doing right now, which includes hopefully working out finding the toxins, the source of the toxins down at the lake before the barges or anybody else translocates sediments that are laden with dioxins, etc. But I'm here to thank you, the council, for last week. All of you seeming, at least everything I could tell, was that you are against the demolition, this shocking fact, I guess, that WashDOT and Kiewit General Manson think that they're coming in on Pioneer Towing's lot and demolishing the old Evergreen Point floating bridge in our area without any proper current Kenmore environmental scrutiny. Mayor Baker, I don't know if I'm green or red here. I just see 154, 153, 152. I don't know what number I'm on.
Well, it's counting down. When you get to
Okay,
zero,
so I'm not out of time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Still showing green.
All right, good. Thank you. I don't want to break the law.
It's not a law, it's a guideline.
A guideline, okay. So I don't know if it's legal or not, Mr. Casaguma, but I do want to say that our nonprofit, PERC, is very interested in collaborating about a solution for the shoreline with Kenmore Air. And if there was some confusion about that, I want the council, our manager, and you and Kenmore Air to know that both the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation and People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore, who are appealing the transportation pier down there where ecology recommended that the city have Kenmore Air test for dioxins and PCBs before they put the pier pilings down. We are very interested for public health and safety purposes in mediating. So I'm trying to make sure everybody knows that. And we're also very happy that the council is against the demolition in our neighborhood of the bridge, the old bridge that is impregnated with asbestos from years and years of car brakes being there, and that there's apparently, as far as I can tell, no environmental scrutiny. And I don't think many people in Kenmore know that it's coming. So a hearing instead of a comment period on April 1st is what I've been told by people who know that asking for a hearing would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Is there anybody else?
Oh, I'm sorry. Patrick O'Brien.
And if you'll
Patrick
put the
O'Brien, 6330 Northeast 181st Street, Kenmore, Washington. As you see, I'm donning the 522 initiative, which was to ban GMOs and was trying to make a case with Monsanto. And as you see, there are many cities now throughout the United States suing Monsanto. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention, not that we're growing a lot of corn here, but the environmental movement may not be very fast, but it eventually catches on. And so I was rather dismayed last week when the folks and I can't remember if it was WashDOT or the folks from Kiewit, basically lied to Lori Sperry and said that they had no further plans for that area for 520. And I've read things that said that there is a plan to have light rail and a bridge for light rail, and that would be manufactured somewhere. And I would think that if one did a little investigating, they'd find that they'd probably want to do it here. And the other thing that was interesting in their commentary is they said that there was only asbestos in the pilings, or the pontoons, and they were going somewhere else. That's not true. And many people in this week, since you started into this, have said, no, there is definitely lots of contaminants on and in the road surface. So that was a blatant lie. And in fact, I think it was WashDOT. They know that. So they weren't telling the truth. I found it rather strange that staff would sit with them when you're the permitting agency and they're the customer, that you would sit with them. It reminded me of going down to Olympia, where Mayor Baker and I and a few other people presented with regards to monitoring that site. And who sat with the head of the Asphalt Association and CIMEX but Puget Sound Clean Air? So here's the regulator sitting with the offender, and I thought that reminded me of what was going on here. We should never have our permitting people sitting with the people who are asking to pollute our city. It's backwards. They should be there. They should be the regulators. They should be the applicants. Always. And I thought it was really weird that when we brought up these health issues, that several people started talking about additional tax revenue. I thought that was way off base. It is an issue of public health that the maximum scrutiny be applied to any sort of remelting of asphalt or the breaking up the cement on that site. I and several other people are ready to consult with you for a reasonable fee and give us more than 3 minutes of input, and you'll find that our input may be invaluable at averting problems with the environment and pointing out things that are problems with our permitting process that clearly take place based on what staff's impression is of what City Council wants and not necessarily what the law says. That's what this pointed up. It pointed out that staff is trying to do their job, and no matter what, they were going to permit this because they didn't know you didn't want to. So there was definitely room for better communication there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Janet Hayes.
Janet Hayes, 6303 Northeast 181st, Kenmore, Washington. And I wanted to thank you all. Also, I know I sent an email, but I wanted to thank you in person. It was impressive, and I was so grateful, and you all seemed to really speak from your gut, like it just hit you what they were saying. And that's so necessary for you not to forget, because there's a lot of people that are trying to make this happen. We have a cement plant and asphalt plant that are operating on old permits. There are 10 asphalt plants in the state of Washington that still have permits to reuse and recycle petroleum-contaminated soil, concrete, and asphalt. Kenmore is one of them. It was once called Sterling Asphalt, and Sterling Asphalt still, when you call Sterling Asphalt, you get CIMEX. I also found out that they are still using the same permits because of that grandfathered clause. I know you were worried about the roads and the trucks that would be on the roads hauling it. I'm worried about the product from the recycled debris that's going to go over to the cement and asphalt plant and be processed there, and we get to breathe it. In an unmonitored plant, that bill failed. Jessen Farrell and Jerry Paulette presented a bill earlier to House that Patrick talked about to please put monitoring. They specifically mentioned Kenmore and used Kenmore as the example because of this reason and because of the permit. and because Jay Ensley's bill that it was legal to recycle concrete and asphalt that passed last year. So this issue is coming home to roost because we have that plant right here. Somehow they need to get it monitored if they're going to be there. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, especially if they're going to be using that product. Because what a better way and cheaper way to get rid of it than right here. Recycled and made into a poster that we recycle contaminated concrete. They didn't neglect to tell you about the plant. I know there was something more I had to say, but I've probably forgotten it. Oh, and I want you to remember, as they mentioned, this project would be 1 year. They also told us that the 520 floating bridge project would be 1.5 to 2 years maximum. That was not true. It started in 2011, October 20th, and it did not end till 2015. They said there would be 2 barges a week would be the average. I have photos one day of 50 barges going in and out. That was before we knew the navigation channel was contaminated. We didn't have our 12715 report from the Army Corps. You've got to think about it. And your visions are so good and positive. New dragon boats, all these things, that's so positive. But they're going to be going out into waters that have had things stirred up. You're going to encourage people to swim. Rob said this isn't going to be a swimming beach at Log Boom. It's going to be maybe you can put your feet in it. That's a horrible thing. And I know you agree. We don't have to have it that way.
Mrs. Hayes, if I get you to wrap up, please.
I'm wrapped up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Jordan, thank you so much for bringing the fish and telling us what you do. Blueberry Creek, City Manager. Is that one that we are familiar with? That's the first time I've heard that name.
Yeah, me too.
That's my creek on my property.
That's
so
your creek
it
up
goes
on your
past ours
property.
too.
Okay.
And I'd heard that as an unofficial name. We actually were trying to rename it officially at one point, and it has a number, a 0 something something. But I'd heard that as an unofficial. I don't know if it ever actually got passed by the state, but I'd heard that as well.
In Snohomish County, right near my house, there's a sign on the side of the road that says Blueberry Creek, Salmon Creek, and it shocked me one day because I was trying to name it something else years ago, and that didn't happen. So I'm not sure who did it, whether it was Snohomish County or down here. I mean, they don't even know about the blueberry farm, so I don't know how they would have done it. So I don't know where it came from.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I don't know, maybe City Manager, we could mention this to Eric Admin and see if there's any interest with his Adopt a Stream people or with the group that he's involved with. I know Salmon Restoration.
Okay.
Maybe we can do something there. It would certainly pay off. Thank you very much. Mr. O'Brien, Ms. Hayes, Ms. Mooney, thank you so much for your comments. And next item on the agenda is business agenda, consent agenda. We need a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
And I'll second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? If there are all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands adopted unanimously. Next item on the agenda is business agenda. West Sammamish River Bridge architectural discussion. Mrs. Overlease, Public Works Director and City Engineer, and Mr. Vincente, Capital Projects Manager.
There we go. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to be presenting the West Sammamish River Bridge architectural discussion. This is a follow-up from our last meeting that we had, going through kind of the ideas that we had for the bridge. Before I get started, I'd like to reintroduce our design team. I've got Kevin Kim with Jacobs Engineering, who's taking the lead on the design, and John Owen with Makers, who has been helping us with the architectural elements. So we're here tonight to talk about the West Sammamish Bridge, the architectural look. When we met with you a couple months ago, we had shown you several different options based off of the tour we had. And so we've had Makers put together a variety of images for you to go through and look at. And then hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll get some feedback from you, what you like, what you don't like. And then I'll also be talking about the next steps in the process. The bridge options that we've put together are, we looked at a curvilinear option, a rectangular option, and a combination option that looks at different rounded and angular looks. We're also going to be presenting some different themed ideas for the bridge as well, too. I also wanted to take the time to kind of let you know that there is a very basic look that we could be going for if we wanted to, but we understand you wanted a very more attractive look. I thought it'd be good to show you what it would look like if we didn't do anything. For this presentation, we're going to be showing you different viewpoints. One is from the boat launch, so some of the images you'll see will be taken from this viewpoint. Another one will be taken from the shore, and then the third images will be showing, different type of images will be showing you will be taken from the southern part of the bridge facing north. So this is kind of what the option 0, I call it, would look like if we were to just build a bridge based off of what it looks like today and not really put any fancy features on it. And then with this, I'm going to transfer it to John, who's going to talk to you about the fun part of this presentation.
So as John indicated, we took your input from last session and went back and took those ideas and worked with staff. I must say it was really a lot of fun working on some of these ideas. And tonight we're coming back and trying to show you some interpretations of what we heard from you. And as John indicated, want to hear your reactions to them so we kind of can go take it to the next step. So let's see, do I that work?
Or just tell me I'll do it for you.
Okay, next, please. So, and as John indicated, we're going to show you several different viewpoints of these different ideas. The first comes from near the shore, like you see there, and this is option number 1. And option number 1 basically is a kind of a curvilinear scheme. You see that the little bulb out there, or the overlook, is curved, and it's resting on what one might think of as kind of a pontoon shape. So this particular scheme also has a little bit of a reference to Kenmore Air and the seaplanes that are there. You'll notice also that the location of the little bulb out, or the little overlook there, is not quite in the middle of the bridge. It's where you can get the best viewpoint. So fortunately, we have the pylons there in a location that will support an overlook, and that overlook will be give you a very good view to the west. Next, please. So here's what that same bridge would look like from the boat launch site. And you can kind of see a gentle curve there and a little sponson-like structure sticking out, and a fairly simple railing. And it gives a nice shadow pattern and a nice kind of graceful curvature, kind of emulating a little bit the graceful curvature of the river itself. Next, please. Option number 2 is very different. It is a more classical look, more rectilinear. It plays on the kind of general early to mid 20th century architecture, which is much more refined than we typically see in a lot of bridge construction. A lot of the character it gets is just from a refinement of the concrete construction itself. You can kind of see that the pillars have a little reveal in them, and there's a little bit of articulation along the beam itself. And you also see a little concrete used as part of the railing. It's also kind of a rectilinear scheme. You can see that kind of the overlook is a series of jogs out, which can be very useful in terms of how you have the interpretive panels and that type of thing, but very different than what within that earlier, more sinuous scheme that we just showed you. Next, please. And this is what it would look like from down at the boat launch site. You can kind of see that because of the detailing, the piers have a little bit more refined look and a little more graceful, even though it is a very rectilinear scheme. Next, please. The third scheme picks up a little bit on the history of the boating in the area. The overlook itself is made to look a little more streamlined, a little more boat-like, maybe hydroplane-like, if you will. And it has a distinctive break from the railing and the other elements there. So this is one where the overlook is purposely trying to be distinct from the rest of the structure, and that was another kind of idea that emerged in looking at that. And next, and you kind of see this. I should note that, and you can kind of see how I think better from this one, that the overlook's not right in the center, but would give you a very good viewpoint down the river. I should note that in all cases, these different elements that I'm showing you can be scaled up or down. This is a fairly expansive overlook. It could be made smaller. We're still in a very early stage. We just are trying to get your reaction to some of these things, acknowledging that there's a lot of refinement that needs to go on. Next, please. So those are the kind of the general structural undercarriage elements for the bridge. They give you a series of options. We also looked at different techniques of enhancing the view from the boating for the boating public. Inlays, form liners, painted work, reflective treatments, and so we'd like to present those really quickly. So on the classic scheme that we have here, the one that really emphasizes the refined concrete, we thought it was most appropriate to have form liners that would have like an embossed or a bas relief kind of look to it. And we've just shown in this particular case a naturalistic characteristic with the herons and perhaps ducks. And again, that was in response to some of the comments, wanted to make sure that we used herons or had a kind of a naturalistic characteristic to this. Next, please. Then there's also things you could do with paint, a mural type of thing, and a number of different options there. Again, we shows a kind of a naturalistic scheme here. And when I say paint, it doesn't necessarily have to be, paint. It could be mosaic, inlaid mosaic, that type of thing. It'd be a little more durable. So there's a number of treatments you could use to create a more attractive, more interesting view from the boating viewpoint. Next, please. And this one is a little more futuristic, kind of picking up on some of the hydroplaning or boating activity that was historically along this area. So just another scheme. And finally, we have one more to show you. And this looks like painted pylons, but what it really indicates is about a 6-foot tall strip of highly reflective material. And this would reflect the water and almost tend to make the lower portions of the piers kind of disappear, if you will. So it's going to give you an optical illusion. We'll show you an example of the material. This is a very different approach to this. We would not think about trying to do more than 6 or 8 feet of this. It would just be the bottom scheme. This is an artist installation that used the whole pylon. We would not, I think, advocate for this. This is just something that would be kind of at the boater's eye level. And if you've ever been to Millennium Park in Chicago, they have this giant bean kind of a thing that is highly reflective, made like this material, and people love it. They just love it. They come up and they mug it and take pictures and selfies and do all kinds of stuff. So I thought it'd be really a fun thing for the boaters. So that was the thought, that not this more gargantuan kind of a look here. Next, please. So then we'd like to take a look and give you a tour of some options from above. Mostly the views you're going to see are going to be from the south looking north into the city. And we have some themes we had. We tried to pick up on the suggestions that you had, the heron theme and some of the traditional themes. But in working with staff, we also kind of, well, I'll speak for myself. I fell in love with the hydroplanes and saw the videos and stuff. I thought, oh, geez, you know, that is really, really unique. I don't know of another town that had crazy people riding hydroplanes on the river. So that was one. And then the seaplane thing is something that you'd mentioned, and we thought, well, maybe there's some things we could do there. So we'll show you some things that are what I would call explorations. And so just some early thoughts that we'd like to get your impressions of. So next, please. So here's kind of the viewpoint that we're looking at. This is a computer-generated model. We did this because, you know, as we refine this, we're going to need this kind of a tool to really image what we're thinking about. And you can, what I like about this is it shows the different levels of the bridge. You can see that the new bridge off to the left there is going to be a little bit higher. There's going to be a little bit of a separation. And then you can get a sense of the nice spaciousness of the walkway itself. It's going to be really quite a very nice addition to the bridge. And we just showed kind of the classic pylons here, but we'll come back to those in a minute. Next, please. So, like I say, one of the things we looked at was the seaplane theme, and you know, just for drill, we thought, well, you know, Kenmore Air colors, you know, and Kenmore flag colors, you know, maybe there's, you mentioned turquoise before, but maybe there's some thoughts about that. The light pole is a little bit airplane wing-like. You don't want to go overboard with these things and be too literal. And then the structures on the left and right are takeoffs on the float plane floats. Again, this is a fairly crude drawing. You may not want them this big. They could have lights in them. I think that would be probably the best use. But they could also be much smaller and less dramatic. But it gives you an idea of some of the things that are possible. So next, please. And this is a little bit more refined drawing that shows how you could do these for lights. So that's a little bit more accurate rendition of a float plane float, and you can see how it would add some nice light characteristics up and down the bridge. Again, we're fishing for your thoughts on some of these things. Next, please. We heard a lot about the natural aspects and the heron theme, and again, this is a very quick sketch. I don't think it's maybe the most successful sketch, but you could take some of the wingspan and kind of profiles of a flying heron, for example, and use those either as gateway ornaments or in terms of the light pole. Again, these lights here are shown almost, well, you can see very a little bit, you can see the existing lights underneath, so we're not changing necessarily the height or the size of the light. We're just putting a little more grace into the armature of it. And this one uses the turquoise color that we heard talked about last time. Next, please. The second option is for the rectilinear scheme. Again, these would be made out of concrete, precast concrete. It's a pretty good, solid way to go. A lot of historic precedents for it. Could be very nice. The lights there would present a nice kind of a gateway feature. Again, something I heard certain council members interested in. And you could also use concrete as part of the supports for the lights on the bridge itself. Next, please. And then the third option or theme that we talked about was the boating theme, and there's a number of ways to do this. This is kind of a takeoff on current boating, the paddling. So this is something that would reflect the human generated power, and again, the oars could be made smaller or larger. and you'll see in a minute different ways of doing it. One thing I'd like to call your attention to on this particular scheme is the little lights that you see on the barrier there in the middle, and they could be on the pedestrian barriers on both sides too. Those are a little bit like runway lights. In fact, you could actually use runway lights. You know, we've looked at different options on other bridges where you actually take a runway light, which is lit photoelectrically using, you don't have wiring to it. So that's one thing you could do and give a nice kind of a linear kind of a gateway sequence into town. Next, please. Another way to look at the boating scheme is to go back and think about the hydroplanes and the little cruisers that people had up and down the river in the past. And like I say, I got really enamored with some of the photos and videos of those things, and went and did this particular scheme, just again picking up on some of the geometry of the boats. And it could be made much smaller. Here's another example. It doesn't have to be particularly large. Again, the I would say runway lights or sequence of small bollard-like lights or something that we could consider in any of the schemes. Next, please. And then there's other ways of doing the boating on a less a smaller scale. Oars in the railing, or some of the lights that I had shown you before as just circular lights could have a nice hood on them that would give a nice particular characteristic. And you need in any lighting on the bridge, you have to make sure it doesn't spread over into the water and disrupt salmon migration. So there's some considerations there. But this shows you that there's a number of options out there. We're looking for your feedback on things that you think work and need to be developed a little further, and things we might want to drop off. Finally, I think we're back to John.
So a couple of things that I did want to mention about what was presented here is some of the options that we showed, like the inlays or the painted, they don't necessarily have to go on the columns. They can also go on the beam or on the side of the bridge itself too. So we're not restricted to where we're showing a lot of these elements. We can plop them in different locations if there's an interest in that as well too. Our next steps on this is from the feedback that we get from you, to prepare more detailed renderings, hopefully have it narrowed down to a few ideas, bring those back to you, something far more refined to give you a much better idea of what is exactly we're trying to portray. And then once we get those drawn up, we would return to you, show those to you, hopefully get some feedback on what you like and what you don't like, and then following that we would probably have an open house sometime this summer, take that to the public, get their feedback, and then come back to you for one final rendition.
Just one thing quickly, you're showing treatments on both sides of the bridges. Are we looking at doing the treatment on both sides?
I can handle that. I think the treatments would be primarily on the west side with the new bridge. It'd be kind of tough to go back and rewire the east side, for example, with new lights. But where we have a gateway feature on land that's to the south end of the bridge and maybe to the north end of the bridge, then it would be easy to do things on both sides. And I think that's where you might want to have something that corrals it and gives you that sense of entry. But mostly the on-bridge improvements would be on the new part, the west side.
And then some of the painting work that we do down below could be painted onto the new bridge as well too. There are certain features that could be applied to the new bridge if we wanted to. The inlay would not be possible, but surface treatments would be.
Yeah, I was just looking at the funding aspect. Deputy Mayor.
I had a number of comments. Some of these are really interesting looking designs, but the pictures of the bridge from underneath and at the boat launch show one bridge. They don't show the old bridge, too. Mm-hmm. Now, first question I have, are the pillars that hold up the new bridge in line with the pillars on the old bridge? And if not, then that'll be a hazard for boats going through. They'd have to zigzag through those things.
That is, new bridge will match the
existing bridge to bridge built. You know, the bridge we are replacing was built in 1930s.
Right.
The bridge will remain was built in 1960s.
Okay.
So the new bridge will intentionally line up all the piers the same location.
Okay.
So we could have done, could have done a little bit different, but
So
that
they're
was
in
one of the
line as you're
criteria.
going through. You're
That
not
is
getting-
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And the overlook, you said, was not in the center of the bridge. Why not in the center of the bridge?
I think I can comment on that. I think we strategically locate that so that not only looking at the bridge at the channel at the bridge, but also looking that is probably the best view, seeing the lake to the west.
Okay.
Because we got a lot of other landscapes. So I think that pier location would provide both kind of good view of the river as well as a good view of the lake.
Okay.
Yes, you also want it over a pier, so it's easy to structure it. And we're fortunate that the piers are in a good location for that.
Okay. And the other question I had was, have you taken into consideration that the lake levels do vary? In this last summer, I think it went down over 3 feet from its high level. So if you're putting paintings on those pillars, on the posts, then they'd be high and dry towards the end of the summer. And you wouldn't want to paint them underwater, or they would get covered with algae and slime and everything. So you'd have to start at high water mark. And then when the water goes down, you'd see this bare column underneath it. So if there is some artwork, it shouldn't be something that's coming out of the water like a heron or reeds or whatever. The other question I had is, if you use the reflective coating, then it's going to be high and dry at some point, either that or you put it down under the water, and then when it's high and dry, it's going to be covered with scum that grows underwater, and it wouldn't be shiny unless somebody's down there cleaning it every couple of weeks or so. So I'm thinking, rather than putting any artwork on the pillars themselves, other than the shape of the pillars, maybe the artwork ought to be on the beams and on the railings. Just for that reason. And I don't know whether you've taken that into consideration. But last summer the lake went down to its lowest it's been in many, many years. But it often does fluctuate 2 feet or more.
Yeah, I think we recognize that that's going to be an issue with that, so we'd have to kind of place it up above the high water mark.
And as far as the railings, I really like the oars and the paddling, and that's just my preference. The one that's supposed to be heron, I looked at it and I said, "Is this a bridge for the University of Texas Longhorns?"
Yeah.
That's what I saw there. Okay, so my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I'll go through sort of the same order you did. I liked option 3, which I think is the combo. And I liked the large overlook. And Offcenter is actually the right spot, because when we were watching the boat races, we went along that rail. We found the best spot, and it's about that far over. It's more towards the north than the center. For the artwork for the boaters, I like the imprints, the birds on the piers. I didn't really care much for the paint or the reflection. That was even before Alan's great comments. And the artwork on the all those upper ideas, just felt way too busy to me. I guess I like a more simplified look. I really like the paddles kind of built into the sides. I didn't really care much for the boating, the cement, the seaplane, the herons, or any of the others. So kind of keep it simple, not too busy, and also the more customized it is, the more expensive it's going to be. So instead of some fancy lighting, just go for lighting that does the job, and then do something cool on the rails, I guess is my thought. And so again, focus on function, keep the cost down, add some coolness, but don't go overboard.
Councilmember Danuski.
All right, I'm also a big fan of option 3. I like the larger overlook, and I like the angles, so that's my favorite there. I think I might be more for the forms on the pillars. I kind of want, I feel like I should say I want some color, I want some fun. My mind kind of leans more to the stampings, but if we could do something color that is really going to last, I guess I'm more worried about the paint and all that and how to upkeep it, where it seems like those forms are a lot easier to keep them looking good longer. I learned looking through this that I'm a less is more kind of girl, kind of like Dr. Curtis. I was not really a fan of the seaplanes and the boating ones. I didn't even get the seaplanes. I don't think people would have understood that without knowing what that was. The herons were pretty decent, but I think I like that more because it was just a little more subtle, a little less is more. I wasn't a huge fan of going through arches either. Let's see. I did like the oar railings. I thought that was kind of like a neat little fun find as you're walking across the bridge to notice those are oars. It would be great if we could get them on the other side as well, but we can only do what we can do. So I guess those are my initial thoughts. Thank you for putting all those together.
Councilmember Herbig.
Just initial reactions. I like the curvilinear, however you say that. I like kind of the kind of more natural feeling that I think fits in better with the environment than kind of the more severe looks. Personally, I'm a fan of the reflective treatment. I've actually kayaked by that over by the Arboretum where I think your example's from, and it was really an interesting find there. There are upkeep questions, of course, but if those can be addressed, I think it's really interesting. Inlays are also great, too, although I worry about moss and things growing in the inlays. I personally like the heron kind of theme. I like the boating theme also. The railing I thought was really interesting, the oar railing. I'd be interested to see other kind of fun things we could do with the railings, because that's something I really enjoyed on our tour. I can't remember all the details, but I remember being impressed by some of the railings. Other than that, I appreciate the work. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. On the three different options that you provided, I would say I like the option 2 and 3 the best, and somewhat indifferent to either one of those. On the colors on the piers or the posts underneath, I just didn't care for the kind of decal, more kind of mural look, and I would rather see something just colorful, just more simple coloring, but less detail, because I feel like it will become a maintenance issue or create other maintenance problems for staff long term. I did like the embossed relief. I thought that was kind of neat, and it probably would, I don't know what kind of maintenance it would be, but I thought that wasn't bad. On the seaplane, so I love the idea of being able to incorporate the seaplane theme somehow. I didn't care for the floats on the walkway, but I was picturing that center light post with the wingspan, and if just below that the wingspan you put a big otter prop right up there on those lights, that would define it as a seaplane, and I think that would be really iconic. And then you could eliminate the stuff on the sidewalks and simplify it in one way and yet really create a bold statement. I did like the paddles on the railings, and I do like the idea of anything we can do with some lighting up above. I think that would be really neat to add to it. And lastly, color. I love colorful bridges and walkways, so anything you can do to add color. I know you've kind of got that turquoisey color in the railings and stuff, and that looked great, but I think color would be a cheap way to make it some of the features really pop. Thank you.
Councilmember Sperry.
Well, thank you. It's the fun part. So my first question is, are any of these options, like on the bridge styles, much more expensive than the other, or is it too soon to find out?
I think these are relatively minor compared to big bridge scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be some variation, but it shouldn't be huge.
Okay, perfect. Great. As far as the shape of the bridge, I did like the curvilinear one where it looked kind of more like a modern flowy look. I'm a little bit, when I looked at the bump out the viewing area, on that particular one it didn't seem as prominent on the other one, so I think that somehow having a nice large round viewing area would be considered a positive. I do like the addition of the blue and the turquoise color. As far as the pillars underneath, to me that's the least important part of the whole thing. Perhaps maybe reaching out to the boating community, what they like. Of the three options, the reflective one is the most intriguing to me. And then I did ask my husband on the themes of the different lighting and stuff, and he was pretty funny. He said, no themes. So I thought that was good feedback. And the one I actually liked the best was the very last one, with the lighting that you mentioned was also could be the runway lights. And what I liked about it was the color, having the blue, and I love, love, love the idea of having the lights along the center way and on the both pedestrians, because that's a big thing for our bike riders and walkers. They really want that really nice pedestrian lighting. And then when you said tonight how it was related to airplane lighting, I thought, well, that's kind of a bit of a nod to our seaplane. I know we don't have lights in our, but anyway. So I did like that. I think that's about it. Thank you. This is fun.
So I really appreciated the curvilinear outcropping that hit home with me. And on a couple of the treatments, on the lighting in the center, I like the seaplane. But on the outside, I loved the traditional. It looked like buoys marking the runway in the water for the seaplane landing. And since that is an FAA-designated runway out there, I thought it was. I mean, it truly is. There's a three-letter code for it and everything. So I really appreciate that, the buoys marking with the seaplane lighting in the center.
Another question.
Yeah. And as far as the treatment, I kind of like the embossed one, the more the cement work, because the others seem to be painting it whatever would require much more maintenance. Where this could be cleaned out of growth every now and then, and I think it would. Looking at just the maintenance aspect, Deputy Mayor.
I had a question about the construction of the bridge. If we're going to maintain 2 lanes going each way during the construction, the new bridge is going to be on the west side of the west bridge. Okay, and so then when the old bridge is torn down, how are they going to be next to each other like these pictures show? There's virtually no space, maybe 3 feet or so.
Mainly because the new bridge will be much wider. We are providing 16 feet wide pedestrian/bike lanes.
Yeah, I realize that, but you're maintaining the 2 lanes going southbound that we have now, building the bridge to the west of it.
Correct.
So how wide is that bridge? And you can't make the new bridge wider in infringing on that space.
During construction, the during the demolition of existing bridge, the southbound traffic will be on future pedestrian width.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you're not building the full width of the bridge until the full width of the new bridge until the old bridge comes down.
Correct. So we wouldn't have the full pedestrian bike lane until bridge is complete.
So during construction, you'll lose the bike ped facility southbound. I mean, bikers can use the travel lanes, but pedestrians will be on the other bridge.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Curtis.
I had a question on connectivity. So let's say if I'm at Log Boom Park and I want to get myself to Rhododendron Park, seems like I'm going to go across the bridge going south, and then I'm going to have to go down through the boat ramp and go underneath the bridge, and then go up to Log Boom that way. I mean, to Rhododendron that way. Is that the connection?
You're talking after construction's complete?
Yes.
That would be one way that you could go. They could also go all the way to 170th and cross at the light there to get to Rhododendron Park. Or they could go by boat if they wanted to.
City Manager.
All these improvements we're talking about, are they designable by an architect?
Yes.
As opposed to an artist? So I think we need to have the artist conversation, because I've got a local artist chomping at the bit wanting to be in on this. Can we have that conversation just to get it off everybody's chests and work through it?
Do you want me to go for it, John?
Well, I'll start off by saying that everything that we've shown here today, our architect can design and can implement into our plans and make it constructible. As far as if we want to do anything additional, it would depend upon what that additional work would be. There are certain things that the architect could not do that would require an artist, and then I'll let Chris talk more about that.
Sure. Well, I've learned, I think of art in two ways on structures like this. You can have what we call artist-made building parts, and I think John's team is perfectly capable of designing a paddle and a railing. I think form liners. So I think what you've seen is well within John's team's ability to flush out for us. But if I think if you were wanting to take this to a different place, or you really wanted to have a different level of art integrated, then there's value in bringing in an artist. And also, too, we can delineate areas that after the bridge is built, you could have, you could have art made and installed in certain areas. So if there's somewhere around here you would like a standalone piece of art, that's another way to go. So, it really is, I'm hearing simple is better and clean, but tied together. And I feel like that's what John's team can do for us. John?
If I could add, I think there are a number of opportunities at a smaller scale where some artistic enhancement might be possible. We've talked that some of the historical elements or pieces related to the natural environment. I think you saw a few of those on the field trip in Redmond and Kirkland. That could happen. So there are opportunities, but I would say, given what I've heard today, that the artwork would be more of a smaller scale and related to specific natural or historical elements.
John, could you go back to one of the underside bridge pictures, please?
You gotta make me remember where they're at.
Up, yeah.
There you
So
go.
take one of those pictures, you have that very flat face girder that you see. I mean, if you wanted to do, you could do a very large mosaic, the whole linear length, or, a big piece of the bridge. That's something I would recommend that you actually hire an artist to design, and that can be installed after the concrete work is done. So it really does come down to, the look you want and feel and where you're interested in having that.
So that's one of the reasons I asked the question about the path to get from one to the other. So if people went down the boat ramp and underneath, then that wall could be done some kind of art as you went through then to Rhododendron Park.
Mm-hmm. And I think you have two options. You can try to think really hard about all the cool things you want up front. You can build the structure and incorporate what we think makes sense now, and then you look at your flat surfaces and your user experience in the after, and we can make modifications then. The nice thing about, John, can you talk about our grant money and really what we think the grant can pay for versus what we think we'd have to pay out of our own pocket?
So we got a variety of grant funds that will support the payment of this project. Our grant funds will pay for the bridge structure itself, the approaches. They'll pay for a lot of the necessary items. Our bridge grant that we have right now will not pay for any architectural or any art-related features for this project. The other grant that we have, which is the state funds that we have, we don't yet know what we're allowed to build with that because we haven't gotten the information from the state agencies on that yet. So the potential is that they could pay for some of that, but there's a good chance that any art we put out there, we would have to pay for it ourselves, along with the architectural elements out of our own city funds.
So the great news is we're really early in design. We're not even at the 30% milestone yet. So there might also be the potential, as we learn more about that transportation funding from the state and really what kind of flexibility is there, might give us some more information.
Yeah, my experience is if you can make the artwork integral, whether it's artwork, artist designed or architectural designed, if it can be integral to something that's necessary anyway, you know, that's a good way to do it. For example, the oars railing is something, well, it's a railing. You know, it's not art, it's a railing. So,
and the same goes for the form liners as well, too. The form liner is a very simple item that's added to the construction, and that would be reimbursable by our grants. They wouldn't deny us that. Yeah.
I am curious and asking a follow-up question, if I may, and that really is, how important is it to council to tie the two bridges together? Because to me, I think it's important. But at the same time, I expect the work that'll be done to the East Sammamish River Bridge will be with our own money. So I think that's guidance John could use early up front as well.
Yeah, I can definitely say that any work done on the bridge to the east will be with our own funds. Our grant will not pay for any work on those bridges, on that bridge, I mean.
Councilmember Sperry.
Well, I appreciate Christy bringing that question up. Nothing makes an old bridge look worse by putting a new bridge next to it. So I think that we would definitely want to come up with ways to, you know, repeat the color, repeat some lighting, do something so that there's some symmetry and that kind of thing. However, I do appreciate being very honest that anything that we do to the old bridge would be an additional funding, and we would need to find a way to cover that cost. So, thank you.
Probably the most practical way to mitigate that difference would be working on the sidewalk and railing, because that bridge already has a very narrow sidewalk, which is almost substandard to current standards. So if we could, you know, if city is willing to invest a little bit more, I think that would be the probably best bang for the buck in terms of what people see and how we can mitigate that look. That's my opinion.
Councilmember Danuski.
Okay, that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. The best way in my mind to tie those two bridges together is make the railing and the sidewalks the same on both sides if we've got the money to do that.
Councilmember Curtis and Councilmember Herbig.
Kind of going along with that, if our ideas keep it kind of simple, then it doesn't cost as much as if you go all exotic. So just repeating whatever we do on the sides.
I think it's important that we tie the two bridges together in some way. So if we can do that in a cost-effective way, I think I'm totally in support of that.
Councilmember Sperry.
So one of the things you just mentioned intrigues me about trying to make the sidewalk a little bigger. Is that what I was hearing on the old bridge side?
That's possible. We may need to widen the bridge a little bit to have a wider sidewalk. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we can replace the railing barrier similar to what we'll do on the new bridge.
That would be really interesting to get some options on pricing and stuff for that. You know, I don't even know if this is possible, but because we learned that there wouldn't be any pedestrian access on the new side, it'd be nice to have some widening beforehand. I don't even know if that's possible, but
a lot of it really is going to depend upon our schedule timing. With the construction of the new bridge, we are kind of stuck between certain windows of construction.
Of course,
and if
yeah.
once everything gets designed and planned, we want to go out to add as quickly as possible. And if at our advertisement time, our construction start time is at one of those urgent windows, then we have to work on the new bridge first.
Got it.
So a lot of it does depend upon that element. But if we get started at a time where we can't get to that window, we could potentially work on the other bridge first. So it really just depends on our timing. We want to get this thing replaced as quickly as possible based on its rating.
And it basically just, adding more project without any funding.
Councilmember Smith.
I too think they should definitely be tied together as much as we can. I'm curious, Kevin, you said something about expanding the sidewalk or expanding the bridge. So is that like, that sounds very expensive to me, expanding the existing bridge. And so is that like cantilevering
Well, I have to look at it in detail. That's what I was thinking. All we need is, I think existing sidewalk is like 4 feet.
Something like that,
Yeah, it's in order of 4 feet. So if you are to make it 5 or 6 feet, a little bit wider, that's I think it's a relatively easy widening compared to.
Great.
So we don't need to add any we call substructure elements, because I think we'll be able to just cantilever out a little bit.
Okay.
So that is probably an option we have to look into.
Okay, thank you.
I'd look at the lane width on the bridge too and see if there's any opportunity to scrunch it up and use what we have first.
So, Mrs. Overlease, Mr. Vincenti, you got everything you need?
I think, John, could you summarize, if you heard any themes, would you summarize what you heard?
I heard simple. I heard do something creative with the railing. I predominantly hear they like the curvilinear or the curvilinear or angular look of the bridge. There is a concern about what we do underneath it in terms of the water levels, maintenance, maybe doing something very simple or nothing at all. I do hear that we want to have a really nice lookout, take advantage of the view that we can have from our bridge, and then also kind of stay away from the large, wild and crazy kind of stuff that we've presented here tonight. And this, again, keep it simple.
What did we hear about artist? I need an answer to that question.
Councilmember Spurry.
I'll jump in. Not at this time. That I'm very comfortable proceeding with the architect-designed pieces, and I really, if we want to add something later, then that might be an option. But at this point, I think we're on a good path.
Everybody's sort of agreeing here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Next item on the agenda, Developmental Services 2015 Year in Review. Mr. Hampson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a update on the 2015 year-end report for Development Services, and I was planning on just using the information that was in the packet, so I don't have any additional overheads or presentations. And I was just going to go through the slides and the graphs one by one, and if you have any questions on those graphs, just jump in and ask me a question, and while we're going through it might be easier. So the first graph is a summary of the total revenues throughout the 2015 that don't include the impact fees. And as you can see, it is an increase from 2014, but it's not as dramatic of an increase as 2014, so that might be a sign. Pretty hard to predict, but it could be leveling out is kind of what we're thinking. The applications for the land use have dropped pretty significantly from the revenue from the previous years. And mainly what I think that was is those previous year, last year specifically, was a lot of the older plats getting started back up. And what we're seeing now is mostly the final plats and the final short plats are getting processed at this time. I think it's important to point out on the land use applications per year, the total short plats that we received this year are really high, and that is a indication of the final short plats getting processed. So a lot of the older plats, as they get built, they have to come back in later for a final plat approval process, and that's why we're seeing such high numbers at 14 and 15. So I think that those are going to start to go back down and level out, because a lot of those are the older plats that haven't been built from 2008, 9, and 10. And we're getting up to the end of the state extension on land use applications, so I think we're going to start to see those plats wind up unless there's another extension. The engineering permits. The revenues for the engineering permits really have stayed the same as fairly compared to last year. A couple of years ago we had a pretty high spike, but that was mainly because of the East Creek project, the 59 to 60 long plat that's along 80th. And so I think that's what most of those revenues are for. But again, we're not seeing a lot of new large plats come in, so I think that number is going to decrease a little bit over the next year. The engineering permits and applications are, again, pretty comparable to what we've been seeing in the past. But if you notice, especially events permits, those are the permits that we issue for activities outside of the normal permitting scope. It could be at one of our parks, or it could be a block party or something. But the special events permits are starting to take off, and I expect that those will just continue to grow. And those, keep in mind, take a lot of people's resources and stuff to put them on, especially if they involve the different people from the different departments. The building permits, the revenues, we actually saw a pretty dramatic increase from last year. It looked like a 30% increase from 2014, which is mainly because of the Spencer, the Main Street, Spencer Square, the Link building permits. But we are also seeing a lot of new single-family residences, and it's pretty comparable to last year, but it's still dramatically higher than we've seen. I think I'm not seeing anything before 2007. We've seen as high of single-family permits, and those are those lots that had final short plat or long plat process are finally getting built out. And so we're still going to see, I think that those numbers will continue for the next year or two as those lots totally wrap up and they build them out. The inspections, of course, as we have more buildings under construction, the inspections increase. And, over the last year, we saw a pretty significant jump in inspections, up to 52% from 2014. But it's mainly the residential, the single-family buildings that are having a lot more inspections done on them. Code enforcement. You'll notice from that graph that there's just been a significant drop in the code enforcement cases that we handle and process in the city. And there's a number of reasons for that. We've changed a lot of our business practices and how we reply or how we respond to code enforcement cases or complaints. And we're not in the proactively seeking code enforcement realm anymore. Fortunately, we have to reduce some of our resources to a half of time code enforcement person, and the other half of the time is a building inspector to pick up that building inspection. But we are mainly responding to complaints as we get them, and we're working with the customer more to try to handle the cases before they come up code enforcement case. And this could be through more discussions, phone calls, one-on-one discussions with them. In one case, we had a mediator handle it. And so what we're actually seeing is a lot more cases don't rise to the level of being a code enforcement cases. And we're also trying to close them out a lot sooner, or keep track of them and close them out. And so as in 2015, there was only 9 code enforcement cases that carried over that were still active from 2014. The impact fees, the park impact fees are almost identical as last year, which are really high. But again, this is mainly because of Main Street. They had pretty high impact fees, and we'll see in 2016 it'll be high again because of the Link building is going to pay their park impact fees under the 2016 year. So that's good news for Rob and his parks group. They'll have a little bit extra money to work with. The transportation impact fees are almost double what we were seeing in 2014 and previous years. Again, I think that's mainly because of the Main Street property, Main Street project, and also the new single-family residences that come in. So I expect over the next year that'll drop down, but it won't be as low as the 2014 year. The Main Street Link building was credited for traffic impact fees, so that we won't see any revenues for their Link building on the traffic impact fees. That's all I had, unless anybody has any questions.
Questions?
Can I add something on code enforcement? So Brian touched on the drop there. And I've explained this in maybe in the last year or two, but I thought it's just worth repeating. Brian has had a need for additional building inspection services, and so what we decided to do was take the full-time code enforcement position and make it a half-time position, but then take the other half of it and make it building inspection. Does that all ring a bell with you? Do you all remember that? But in order to manage that workload, we needed to change the way we approached code enforcement, and we did 2 main things. One is we stopped self-initiating a lot of the code enforcement cases, unless it had to do with safety or other really important issues. And then we also used the kind of the phone call approach before it actually turned into a code enforcement case, and so we get a lot of compliance that way before it actually becomes a case. So now that said, we've got more sign clutter going on around the city than we used to. So just so you know, so by not self-initiating, we're seeing things like that.
All right, thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much. Next item on the agenda, December 2015 financial report for the city of Kenmore. Ms. Gregory.
Good evening. I wanted to draw your attention to a piece of paper I left at your seat. This December 2015 report includes workload and performance measures at the back of the report, and I was unable to complete the city manager department when this report was published. So we have since completed it. I've given you a copy of it, and we will upload the completed report to the website so it's there for everyone else to read. So I'm happy to report that 2015 closed on a positive and good note, much of it due to some of the comments that Brian just made. In the general fund, for instance, the operating revenues were $600,000 higher than we had budgeted. So in addition to building permit revenues and those related types of transactions, we also had a really strong sales tax year. Sales tax, however, was very strong due to new construction, and in fact it was almost $500,000 of our sales tax base. So that you can see that development in the city is a primary driver of these really good results. The only disappointments on the revenue side this year so far, well, for 2015 and probably going into 16, is the utility taxes. All utility tax revenues were below what I had budgeted, which was kind of a drag. Probably a lot of factors playing into what's going on with cell phones and telephones and gas and electric. Operating revenues across the departments were about $200,000 higher than the budget. And here we're starting to see court costs and jail costs are taking a role. Also in the engineering department, salary costs are high because there's been a lot of work specifically chargeable to capital projects. And those reimbursable type expenses haven't been recognized or credited back to the department. They become revenue to the general fund when they are computed and charged, and that hasn't been fully implemented yet. Also in the general fund, of course, there were transfers out to other funds which totaled over $1.6 million, most of this to the Strategic Opportunities Fund, which was in accordance with that approval that took place during the mid-biennium review. And the ending fund balance for the general fund at the end of 2015 was $3.4 million, which is about 31% of the 2015 revenues. In other funds, as Brian mentioned also, both the park impact fee and the transportation impact fee revenues were strong, and in fact, both of them exceeded in 1 year their 2-year budget. So we were really conservative, and even though Brian and I consult when we develop the budget for those funds, I think we were both really underestimating the activity and the revenue that would be generated, and probably the timing. It may be that not all of it was expected in 2015. We thought maybe it would be delayed. Over $1.4 million was received in real estate excise tax. Again, after 1 year, that's 80% of the 2-year budget. These taxes are earned from the real estate transactions, and the number of transactions this year was very high compared to last year. It was a 23% increase in real estate transactions in the city for a total of 589. I think that's close to a record. The Transportation Benefit District car tab fees were right on target. Fuel tax was about right on target too. Wasn't declining as we've seen when the prices go up, because lately the prices at the pump have been stable or declining. And street maintenance expenses are also in line with their budget, so the street fund is in good shape. Nationally, over the course of the year, we noticed that there was a continued decline in the unemployment rate. Started the year out at about 5.6%, and by December the unemployment rate had declined to 5.0. The Dow Jones recovered a lot of what was lost during the latter half of the year, but it still closed at a lower point than it had closed in 2014. During this coming year, we'll probably see interest rates take a little bit of a notch up, and the strength of the dollar against foreign currencies will probably impact our exports and also impact our economic growth and slow that down a bit in the area. But the outlook for the 2016 statewide economy is positive, but it may not be as strong as it was in 2015, and we'll probably experience that at the local level as well. This concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Herwig, and then Councilmember Curtis.
Well, I appreciate the report. I just had one kind of, something jumped out at me, and it's not related to this year's report, but it was on here. I'm looking at on page 4, there's the monthly sales tax revenues by source. I noticed in like October 2012, it looks like we had a negative, wholesale sales tax income that month. How do we have negative sales tax income?
That was a year that the Department of Revenue recognized that they had given us sales tax that we didn't deserve, and
Okay.
they took it away from us.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
What is the strategic operating fund at? Or
The
strategic opportunities? Yeah.
Fund. Right now, it is the fund balance.
Yes.
I believe it is, let me find the right chart. has about $3 million in cash in it at the moment.
Deputy Mayor?
Well, can I clarify that?
Well, certainly.
So we're talking about the Strategic Opportunities Fund? Yeah, so for the budget, however, projects it at a $1.8 million ending fund balance at the end of this year. So what she's talking about is just current cash available, but with all the things we have planned for at the end of the biennium will be 1.8 million.
Right.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I'm looking at the bar graph on page 30 of 60, the second page, and going through the whole year until we get to December, year-to-date revenues are greater than expenditures. In some months, like in May, looks like it's about $2 million more. But when we get to the end of the year, the expenditures are greater than the revenues. When 11 months are the other way around, it's hard for me to see how, and that amounts to probably about $500,000 difference.
It's purely the accounting.
Now, there was one 2/3 million transfers. Are they included in those expenditures?
We book all of our transfers one time a year, and usually when we close the books at the end of the year.
Okay.
So all of that $1.6 million in interfund transfer going out of the general fund was recorded in December.
Yeah, but even so, there was $2 million difference between income and revenues in the month of May. And there was a surplus of revenues in every other month as well. So those $2 million would have, so there must have been a real loss in revenue.
It wasn't so much a loss in revenue, it's just a inloading of expenditures, because in addition to those expenditures in December, we had $500,000 worth of payments to the police contract.
Okay.
So catching up at the end of the year.
A lot of things had to be paid in December year end.
Right. That's
that were
one.
deferred, weren't spread out over the whole year.
Right. That's correct.
Now, if we are $500,000, well, I guess the transfers make up the difference there.
The transfers
So
do.
we didn't lose money.
No, we did not lose money, and
Okay.
we budgeted and planned for those.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So if there are no objections, we will accept and file the report.
Thank you.
Staff report.
Several things, Your Honor. On April 5th, we were trying to have a joint meeting with Fire District and Lake Forest Park and City of Kenmore, and we were also going to try to kill two birds with one stone that night and have our legislative delegation come and thank them for their great efforts during the legislative session. Well, we would still like to have that thank you for our legislative delegation that night, April 5th. It's a Tuesday. We're looking at 6 p.m. The Fire District wasn't able to get a majority of their board to come that night, so we'd actually like to have that joint meeting on another night, and we're looking at May 15th or 16th. That's a Monday or a Tuesday night. So just in short summary, legislative delegation thank you event, 6 p.m. April 5th. And then we're looking to have a joint meeting with Lake Forest Park and the Fire District on May 15th or 16th.
May 15th is a Sunday.
Oh, must be the 16th or the 17th then.
The April 5th meeting is what time?
6 p.m. Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
And that appears to work for Lake Forest Park. I'm still waiting to hear from the Fire District.
And it's all contingent on special session not actually happening that day.
I need to ask.
On May?
Oh, no, I was talking about April 5th.
April 5th.
Oh.
It's only a couple weeks away.
That's a good point. So be flexible.
We're not sure where the finish line is yet, so.
Oh.
Yeah. So our
April 5th is actually bad, but whatever.
it's bad for you?
We'll make it.
Well, what's happened is our intergovernmental affairs firm, Gordon Thomas Honeywell, has checked with our legislative delegation, and they've all said that April 5th works. So
They're the hardest group to get together, so if that works, that works.
And then also, this Thursday is a big day because that's when Sound Transit Board meets, and they're going to vote on a draft system plan. And so we're all in suspense, and of course they're all very tight-lipped about it and won't reveal anything until that day. But it's at 1:30 down at Sound Transit Boardroom at Union Station. And I know Chris and I plan on attending, and Mayor, I'm assuming you'll be there?
Front row.
All right. We might have some yellow T-shirts. Yep. And I don't have a burning desire to have one-on-ones this week. I can, and I can be available, except for Thursday. But
A little while we're meeting.
yeah, so unless you really want to meet with me, we can assume no one-on-ones this week.
We'll give our time to the mayor.
Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
All right, comments, reports, initiatives. A lot going on this past week. Councilmember Smith.
I would only add that our city manager did a fine job in his presentation at the State of the City address last week, and it was an enjoyable event, and he represented our city very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sperry.
Well, I was thinking, what an interesting meeting. We got salmon and gift baskets. It was kind of different. Anyway, but thank you.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Herbig.
Nothing to add?
Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing to add.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
So, first of all, I got a request. I had my monthly meeting with the seniors today. And Public Works, there was a request for picnic tables, because the ones that are out are literally falling apart, and either the top surfaces could be refinished, or we could get a few new picnic benches at Rhododendron Park, as they get heavy use every year.
Are those the ones under the?
No.
They're out in the
Out.
park. Okay. Picnic tables. Okay.
That was my question. So those of you, and I want to thank those of you that have done this, that are going to the dinner on the 30th of March at Inglewood with Sound Cities Association, really appreciate it. If anybody else can go, I would appreciate them talking with Nancy Meehan and getting signed up. So far, I think we're having a pretty good showing, but this is on our hometown. It's normally way south. I'm glad that it's up here. I want to show them that there's an advantage to coming up here. I think we've got close to 90 people already signed up. It should be a pretty good dinner and great choices on food.
You know who on the council is signed up? Could you be sure that?
Oh, I don't want to call people out.
Well, I just want to know if I'm on the list.
We have 7 people signed up, and it includes a couple of staffers, so that should give you.
I just wanted to know whether I'm signed up and whether.
You could check with Nancy. I think
It's
I
got to
don't know
verify
if
it.
you
Yeah,
check with
that's all.
Nancy because she knows. I don't have the list.
All
I
right,
really don't.
thank you.
I just know there's 7 signed up so far, and 2 of them are staffers. So,
But just 5 of us.
so far that I know of. So anyway, that's all on that one. Councilmember Herbig, in a different role, and I were at the light rail opening on Friday. We got a ride on the train down to the Capitol Hill station and get out and look around there. It was amazing who was there. I mean, it truly was. I was stopped, as was Councilmember Herbig, by a couple of people who said, we're going to be very happy on Thursday. I had conversations with Dow Constantine. Congresswoman Del Benny was there, and so that was great to see her. But there was a lot of favorable comments from a number of different people. So I'm encouraged. My fingers are crossed, and we are hopeful. So anyway, thank you all. And if there's...
I do need to mention one more thing. So next week, on the 30th and 31st, the Washington State Parks Commission is meeting down in Tumwater. And the St. Edward projects are going to be a topic of discussion down there, including the ball fields. And our landscape architect, Bruce Dees, is actually arranging for parks commissioners to go to a sports complex in Tacoma that has the latest LED type non-spillage kind of lighting. And it's going to be on the 29th. So I know that makes for a busy week. Council meeting on the 28th, and then the 29th, and then the Sound Cities thing on the 30th. But I'm actually going to try to make an effort to go down to Tacoma and be part of that when they view those lights. And I think it might, I know it's a busy week, but it might be really great if I could have at least a couple council members come with.
Oh, I'll be there.
Oh, good. Okay. For the board, for the two board for representatives from the two boards to interact, I think that'd be a great opportunity. So, okay.
You know me, I show up for everything. All right. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned.